That's awesome. Um, you know, we kind of touched upon it a little bit there in, assessing students, current state of being. But speaking of assessments, what are the current gaps that teachers need to overcome with assessments, and what's top of mind for folks at ISTE when it comes to assessments?
Yeah, assessment definitely needs to look. That's probably one of the areas of biggest changes that needs to happen from the face-to-face to a remote classroom. And that's because you're not in the same room as your students. And so a lot of things can get lost in translation, lost in communication. So the biggest shift that we think is valuable is the shift to more formative assessments, where rather than waiting until the end of a unit or the end of a lesson to assess your students and see where they are, build in small checks for understanding and quizzes and reflections, opportunities for some sort of interaction as much as possible throughout the process. And it can be done in ways that don't feel like assessments either. Like if you are able to incorporate a 3-word summary of how each student feels at the end of each day, or every student at the end of an activity has to submit via a form, like what was their muddiest point? What did they not get from that activity, and submit it to you. It not only helps you keep better tabs on where your students are as a teacher, but also teachers can keep tabs on how they're doing and what they need to shift on or tailor their instruction, or wow, we really need to go back and revisit this, or great, we can move forward with this. It can also look like interactive instructional content where as students are learning, they're interacting with the content. And this is an example of a way that technology is really opening those doors. And the teacher or the school can be actually collecting data as students are interacting, whether they're playing a game or answering a multiple choice question as they go through, just quick checks for understanding. But the more frequent and the more meaningful that assessment can be, the more helpful it'll be all around.
Got it. You just mentioned it. We're talking a lot about online instruction and everything, and I love the idea of doing more formative assessments and just collecting those data points and building a better digital picture of what that student, who that student is and how they're doing. When it comes to designing online instruction in general, what are some best practices that you and ISTE put forth?
Yeah, I'd say one that people are, it seems so obvious, but people are often most surprised by, is just like, keep it simple. I think there's a lot of temptation to, well, I need to get, all these resources and all these tools and pull them all into one place, where really the best strategy is like, pick 2 or 3 things that you want to try and have those be kind of the areas of consistency and build off of them or around them. But keep it simple is like a pretty good mantra. We talk a lot about cognitive load of students and what it means for, if you're a learner, taking in information via technology in some way. So, anything from like using the same font throughout any document or resource to like increasing the amount of white space in between, images and text and everything like that can do wonders for students' cognitive load, so that they're actually able to take on or take in the information, the content, and contextualize it, as opposed to, being distracted and using some of their brain power to have to figure out where things are and where to find things like that.
That's awesome.
I'll also say that we're big proponents of the Universal Design for Learning framework, which is a great resource for just understanding that, back to the equity question as well, when you design in ways that allow for flexibility for the ways that students are taking in information and for the ways that they're processing and exhibiting what they understand, then you're by default designing for those groups of students that can often get left behind. So Universal Design for Learning is is a definitely a good framework and a good resource to kind of base online lesson design off of.
That's great. Now, I know the ISTE Live conference is coming up in June. Is there anything that you're really excited about for this year's conference?
So it's going to be great. So we did our first virtual conference last year, and overall it was a huge success. We had amazing speakers, a ton of sessions that I'm still working my way through, because you have access to all the recordings of these sessions from last year. I tried to just set aside some time on my calendar, like once a week, to go back and see if there's anything of interest that I want to dive into. I think what I'm really excited about that we got a little glimpse of last year is like how we can not only just try to recreate what we were doing in the in-person conference, but again, with the same theme, like rethink what we're able to do because we're in this virtual setting. So it's not just taking an exhibitor hall and putting it online, or taking, a session and making it into a virtual session done via webinar. But there's so many other areas that can add to the fun and like the networking. For example, having like a persistent chat throughout that you're able to connect with people who aren't even in the same room as you at that point, but you're, connecting on similar topics. And then I'm also excited about the kind of gamification of the conference. Last year we got a little taste of it, but being able to get points or build up credit by doing certain things, checking things off the list, it really makes it for a fun experience and gives you kind of a path to hold on to, a learning path that you can really use as your guide throughout the whole conference experience.
That's really cool. I can't wait to see that. I've gone to conferences where they've tried to gamify things, and it's just kind of silly. With a learning organization like ISTE, I'm excited to see what that gamified learning path kind of looks like. It should be interesting.
Yeah, should be fun.
Cool. Well, Liz, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for joining us on Ask Our Experts, and hope everybody enjoyed.
All right. Thanks so much, Sean.